2023 for me and books was a bit of a wild ride. I started my MLIS, which is my Master's in Library and Information Studies program, this year, and because of that, I did a lot of like textbook reading or like fluff reading, because I kind of have two speeds when it comes to like reading in academia, where it's like I need to balance like high content with like absolutely low content. And a lot of the reading that I did for like mandatory readings for my courses is going to come up in this list because why not? A lot of the books that I read were like golden. I think I have all of two children's picture books that I want to talk about in this, so we'll keep the children's content to a minimum. But I was originally planning on doing something where it would be like a top 10 list, where I would just talk about like category, winner of said category. But then as I started to kind of unpack some of the like 110 plus books that I read this year, I realized very quickly that like I can't just talk about like the books that I read that were amazing. I want to talk about like the books that I either didn't finish or I'm like in the process of finishing or that I wish I read, just to kind of fill out the list a little bit more, as well as to kind of talk about the things that I feel like I missed this year, because I did miss a lot. I think when you enroll in grad school, you kind of are, especially one that's very like book heavy, you're admitting that like, no, like a breadth of what I'm going to be engaging with this year is going to be like just heavy content. So without further ado, I guess I'll just jump into it. The first book that I read, not the first book that I read, but the first book that I want to talk about is a Canadian author, Waubgeshig Rice, Moon of the Crusted Snow. It is a piece of dystopian fiction, and one of the main reoccurring beasts and creatures that you encounter, more so towards the end of the work, is the Wendigo. And I have a huge fascination with this North American cryptid mythological creature, kind of like Sasquatch, I suppose. I won't really say too much more because anybody who's familiar with the Wendigo will kind of know what themes are going to come up in this dystopian work. Just a quick sort of little surmise, there is a band far north that loses contact with the rest of society, and kind of what unfolds as a result of that is kind of, it's inspiring. It's about family connections and connections with each other and land, and nature, but it's also about like struggles and hardship. And I think if you look in the background, you'll see my stack of lit. I have the sequel to this one coming up that I will be reading in 2024, which I think also came out this year. This one didn't come out this year. This one came out around the time I was done my undergrad degree in 2017. I also have a copy of Bad Cree, which I've been instructed that also deals with the Wendigo. So if I like that creature, then I should definitely go down that rabbit hole, which I will happily do. So Waubgeshig Rice, Moon of the Crusted Snow, terrific Indigenous work, and just terrific work in general. Next up, I'm going to talk about a book that I didn't finish. I'm about halfway through, but I do think it deserves a mention because some people might like it. Masters of Death by Olivia Blake. She's done some fantastic work in other pieces that I unfortunately have not had the opportunity to read, but Masters of Death is one where each character that she's created does stand out. It's very paranormal fiction, not romantasy in any way. Oh, there might be some. I mean, it's kind of building to certain things, but I'm not even halfway through this book. And what I like about it is that the characters are engaging and interesting. The story's kind of fun. You've got a haunted house that a realtor is trying to sell, and like that's its first like, how do you sell a haunted house? Especially when the ghost kind of like may or may not have a crush on the realtor. So it's kind of this funny little like, he's in denial that he's dead, and it's sweet. This edition in particular is the Indigo exclusive, which is really cool because it's got these like lovely full color illustrations on the inside. I think the back has some too that are actually pretty cool, where you can see some of the characters. There's our ghost and the realtor. I think they're holding hands, yeah. And then so anyways, Masters of Death, it was an interesting read. I picked it up and started reading through it, and unfortunately I haven't really finished it yet because it just hasn't been my cup of tea. And I don't think many other readers out there have kind of run into the same issue, where I was at the FVR Fraser Valley Regional Library and they were selling copies of this book for $1 each, because I guess they just ordered too many and it's just not performing as well as they would have hoped. So I'm going to blast through the children's books really quick here because I have other videos on my channel where if you want to go through and have me speak rave reviews about them, that's all you're going to see. But like for 2023 and my exposure to children's literature, this was the course where I decided, or this was the year I decided that I would specialize as a children's librarian, young adult librarian. And that's not to say that that's necessarily what I want to do with my entire career, but it is like an interesting focus that I ended up picking up. And it's something that I've developed a bit of a passion for and an interest in is the work that children's authors do and illustrators do when they design and build these books, because oftentimes a lot of thought and a lot of effort goes into it, and there's a lot of curation kind of in what is distributed to children that I actually find very fascinating. So first, we're going to talk about John Klassen. John Klassen's Hat Box. Can they come up on that? Yeah, there we go. And each of the books in this series discuss like the value of material possessions. So like dealing with like didactic teachings about theft and crime and like don't take things that don't belong to you. But then by the time you hit like the final book in this trilogy, you get to the concept of like material possessions and ownership and like the kind of distraught nature or fraught nature we have with our possessions and how it can cause conflict. And like if we just abandon those ties or those tethers, we can actually all just sleep better at night is I think kind of the ending message of the story. So something I could learn a lot from, something I know a lot of people could, especially during the holiday season. So yeah, Hat Box. This is actually the cheapest way to buy all 3 books, and it also comes with a lithograph on the inside. So from a collections and curation standpoint, you know, no dusts, no pests. It's a nice box. And then as a collector, it's a nice piece to have. So Hat Box by John Klassen. Other children's lit book, super quick. Vancouver talent Linda Bailey, Mary, who wrote Frankenstein, illustrated by Julia Sarda, who I believe has done work for Disney in the past. Discusses Mary and Percy Shelley's life in detail, and the illustrations are so nice. Like it's such a nice book to just kind of like thumb through, and if you want a refresher on like you know, which lake was it that like Mary got inspired to write this scary ghost story and whatnot. Yeah, so nonfiction biographic piece of children's literature, not meant for like young kids, because obviously it deals with like childhood trauma, losing a parent, and then finding a already married spouse in a graveyard and going through that whole line of thought. But yeah, Mary Who Wrote Frankenstein, terrific. And yeah, if you're a collector of Frankenstein or Mary Shelley pieces, which I am, it's a nice one to have in your collection. Next is one that I read for my young adult literature course, and I was going to put under the category of like books that made me cry, and it did. I sobbed on my deck. I could tell when the book was like hitting at a certain point, tensions were kind of rising, and then like the whatever happens. I don't want to spoil it for anybody. And I sat on my deck, and I think as soon as you read the passage where like so-and-so picks up the phone and mom's on the other end, and the first question is, how long have you known? Like I'm already tearing up just thinking about it. Like I lost it. It was so, this book, Benjamin Elias-Sanes, I mispronounced the last name horribly, I'm sorry, but it is an easy read. If you want to go the audiobook route, I know Lin-Manuel Miranda narrates it. Alexander Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda, which now that I say it out loud, sounds like fresh hell. I'm gonna be honest. Like Lin-Manuel Miranda is a fantastic talent for many things: composition, musical score writing. When I heard he got the rights for Name of the Wind at one point, I was stoked. But like his voice in general, if you want to listen to him narrate like a 300-page book, like I just read it yourself. So Aristotle and Dante, Secrets of the Universe, beautiful piece. I have to drink a glass of water for this because I was recommended this book by an old colleague, and it is very spicy, and I read this, and then I also audiobooked it at the same time because I had to commute to and from school, which my commute can sometimes take like up to 2 hours. Flames of Chaos, Legacy of the Nine Realms by Amelia Hutchins. I bought a paper copy of it because I had a digital copy, and it's not for kids, it's not for young adults. I wouldn't even like, you know, caution tags should be all over this book. It is very spicy, and it is to the point where it's like funny. And I sometimes need to just like have brain candy go in, especially when I'm learning about different like the Dewey Decimal Systems, the different systems for like cataloging and categorizing books and stuff. And I'm like, okay, I need something like just dumb and fun. So yeah, Flames of Chaos, self-published indie book. That should tell you a lot right there. Great. Another book that was recommended to me was by a colleague who I met in grad school, and I've been very lucky because like she's been a super huge influence in my reading career so far. And this book is Superman Smashes the Klan. And I have never been a DC girl. I like historically, if you look like to the down, this is all Marvel books here. I've never really been one to read DC. And it's actually really funny because when I started this book, I was kind of like, okay, Superman. Like, what do I know about Superman? Like, realistically, like, okay, so he's this American, ultra-patriotic, super-nationalistic figure. Like, I just am like, Superman, ugh. And what I got out of this was a really touching story about American history and the Ku Klux Klan, and how, like, Superman as a figure can also be someone who's been subject to racism and being kind of put on the outside fringes of society when he was young, right? And you learn about like the impact on different racial demographics, Chinese and African Americans, that were impacted by this horribly racist force in American history. And yeah, just it's this neat little piece that like explores nonfiction with a lens of fiction, and I think it's definitely worth mentioning if you're going to do a top 10 for 2023. This was one for me for sure. So okay. My list is just getting like more and more unhinged, which is fine. I'm going to talk about a book that I've talked about in its own video. And like, if I had any editing skills, I would just edit like the shitty How to Train Your Dragon memes all over it. Fourth Wing. I got the new collector's edition because I have bought 2 other copies of this book that I have repeatedly loaned out to people, have gone missing, or I've just given away because I'm like, no, anyone who like has a pair of ears needs to read this book. Because I will yell it at you and be like, no, read this damn book. It's so good. It is fun. The fantasy spice is like not overbearing. And like, she's a librarian archivist that like decides that she wants to like, or is told by her mom that she has to go be conscripted into being a dragon rider. And like, what I got out of this was one of the most compelling reads I've had since anything by Sarah J Maas. And which says a lot. It's, you know, I'm not looking for necessarily like Pulitzer Prize winning here. I'm just looking for a good time when I'm in grad school, and this has been it for me by a measure. Having said that, this book came out, I believe, in like March or April of this year, maybe even May, 2023. I didn't pick up on its success until like the summer, like June. And so I read through it really quickly. And then the sequel came out in November, which I believe was like 6 months or less away from the original release date. Which I was at first really amped about because I'm like, oh, okay, like, this means I get closure for a lot of things right away. It means like the story is just going to keep going. And I was so disappointed by Iron Flame. Like, Iron Flame has a mean case of like sequelitis in that there's just so much content. Like, I think Iron Flame is like almost twice the size of this book. The pages are like Bible thin. And there's too much going on in such a large book, which is like sensory overload. Like, I had to audiobook it. I read through it. And I just found that by the time I got to the end, especially in like the last 90 pages, like it's not even the last 100 pages, it's less than that. Like event after event after event is happening. And yes, that's a good technique for creating a hook for the next book for your audience, but like it came together as very rushed and I felt kind of sloppy. So like the second book to this series, not very great. The first book, absolutely fantastic. Could almost be a standalone. Like, just it's completely like different in that regard. But am I gonna read the third one? You bet your ass I'm gonna read the third one because, like, again, like I loved this book so much, and I'm willing to recommend to anyone with ears. Yeah, it's gonna happen, right? Okay. Now I'm just gonna power through spice and books that I wish I read. Books that I recently acquired because like Indigo had a sale, and Boxing Day sale is kind of like my favorite time to like just snap up all the books that I didn't get a chance to. Katie Robert. Anybody who knows me knows I have a penchant for Katie Robert books because they are terrible, but they are great, but they are terrible. And the Radiant Sin is like part of her like neon gods spin on mythos and ancient Greece, which I have an immense amount of love for Greece, and Greek literature and myth, and it's smut if you couldn't tell by the name. But it's fun, and I had a lot of fun reading it. And I think out of all the books that she's put out in the last little while, Radiant Sin was probably one of her better ones, right up there with Neon Gods, which I think was the second one to the series. This one I think is like 4 or 5. I skipped one of them because it dealt with like polyamory, which I didn't really enjoy very much. So yeah, Radiant Sin, very fun. Next is Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton, which I posted the shit out of because I found myself shaking my head laughing the absurdity of the paranormal stalker trope romance. I was like, what's going on? And that's pretty much my experience with this entire book. I think by the end of it, I was making jokes about like QAnon because that is a theme in this text. And I tried reading Hunting Adeline, the sequel to it, which was even more QAnon heavy, and I just was like, I can't do this. I can't put my mind through this like conspiracy theory rabbit hole. But yeah, it's a dumb, fun book that I read this year. Balanced out my organization methods and research evaluation texts brilliantly. So I picked this up on Facebook Marketplace from a chick for like $2. My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey. I thought Tessa Bailey was like a flash in the pan kind of authoress, and nope, she's been in the game for a while. She's written many romance pieces. My Killer Vacation is just light fluff. You read in the bathtub and call it a day. It's like I read it in probably like a couple hours. It was fun. Not much to say about it, unfortunately, but yeah, it was good. It's on my list because I don't know, maybe the cover's nice or something. The colors stand out. Finally, moving down just to the 3 books that I wish I read this year. Allie Hazelwood's short story collection, Loath to Love You, very fun series. Each book has its own following narrative, which I thought was really great. Moving on from that, Twisted Love by Anna Huang. And this was, I'm like powering through it right now. I started it the other day. Fun. I'm surprised it's not self-published because of the level of spice in this book. It's just insane, but it's good. A lot of the vibes in this book kind of remind me of Vancouver, so it really wouldn't surprise me if we found out that Anna was from like the Toronto area or like even the greater Vancouver area, because like the ways that she describes her scenes, I'm like, oh, that kind of sounds like Robson Street or something. So yeah. And finally, the book that I have to order a new copy of, and I'm getting it replaced because it came to me, like, I have to complain, but, like, I don't know if you can see this, but, like, there's a literal hole in my book. Graphic novel, Mooncakes. I think it's just a really sweet little fiction piece about witches, and it's cute, and, yeah, it's gonna be my cute lit, so... Other books that I kind of wish that I read this year include, which I don't have copies of, would be like Check and Mate by Allie Hazelwood, Throne of the Fallen by Carrie Maniscalco, because I really loved her Wicked series. The James Patterson Presents kind of heading on it for the young adults, with the sisters. I don't really want to get into too much depth about what the plot was for those, but it was a lot of fun reading them, and I blasted through them, I think probably within like the span of like 2 or 3 weeks, all 3 books. Throne of the Fallen is her crack at adult literature, where it's using the same realm and environment, a lot of the similar characters. I think the main one is Envy now, as opposed to like, I'm not going to get into who the main character is in the first series because that's a surprise. So yeah, Throne of the Fallen, Carrie Maniscalco is definitely on my list. And also, I don't have a copy of it again, but there's like a really nice one out that I need to get my hands on. I think it's like in the UK, which is really like so far. A Study in Drowning. It's a piece of dark academia, and where it deals like, you know, enchanted magical school in Fantasyland, blah blah blah, right? And I'm like, that sounds so perfect for me while I'm in grad school, but like again, money, time, resources, and again, like a preference for copies that I just, it's going to take time for me to chase them down, unfortunately. But thank you for your time, and yeah, have a good one.